welcome to the Which Way Is Up show with Scott and Michi. I am Scott.
And I am Michi. WWIU show offers us an opportunity to participate in the public conversation while being critical about social concerns in an effort to become more engaged citizens.
So I wanted to touch on the show that we just posted yesterday. And in the beginning of that show, we talk about being on track with our schedules and how often we're recording and how often we're posting. And then it turns out that we didn't post that shit. We had that shit sit. I had it. Let me be correct. I had it sitting for like a month. And then we hadn't recorded either in like a month. And that's because you went on vacation like twice in a month already. So we didn't...
How did I go? No, you went on vacation.
I went on vacation.
And then I went on vacation.
You went on, but no, you're always on vacation. So
what do you?
So it seemed like you went on vacation twice.
No, I didn't. You went on vacation.
And so that's why, so I guess we should apologize to each other, to ourselves, and anyone that's listening as far as the gap in posting and recording.
I'll be honest with you. We are people that have full-time jobs, families, other commitments. Like I know right now, the month of May is going to be crazy for me. You just witnessed as I had to say no to an engagement.
Yes, applaud yourself.
But the reason why I said no was because otherwise you and I would not have an opportunity to record in May.
Yeah, because you're like booked up to like the fall, right? with gigs and
actually
apprenticeships.
Right now, I have until June 12th. June 12th is my last commitment.
Not bad.
That's 6 weeks out.
Right.
So that one weekend that I just said no to, and actually it's only one Saturday, but still that'll be one day that I have to myself, and chances are you're gonna get a piece of that because we have to record unless we find little pockets of time somewhere else.
Getting a piece of that.
But all that to say that again, we have to, and we don't want to make it the norm, but we also want people to realize that, like I said, we're human beings, we have commitments, we have schedules, very full lives, and this is something that we do enjoy doing, but there will be times where it's going to get a little crazy and it's not going to be as consistent. We're going to try to minimize that as much as possible, but we're human and I'm not here trying to front.
And we did know that this was going to happen.
Yes.
Eventually.
Yes.
That's why initially we thought we might be able to do the weekly thing, and then we were like, maybe that's too much pressure. Let's try the bi-weekly thing.
Right.
And for the most part, we stood on course with that. And then, life, reminds you that I'm still here. We're still going to, and then, and during that time, I got a second job, like not too long after we started this whole thing. And we got this second job. That's what I'm going to talk about today, situation. We started off the podcast sharing who we are, why we're here, talked a little bit about our personal experiences. I talked about my experience in active addiction and finding recovery. And I touched on a little bit about my career paths and but I didn't really get into as far as my work experience. I talked more about my experience with addiction and whatever. So with my work experience, so I've been in the addiction field for close to 20 years, like 18.5 years or some shit, right? And when I first got into the field, I was excited. Like I was talking about when I was excited when I first got clean, right? I was really excited and I had these expectations. And same thing going into this addiction field, counseling, the helping profession, where I was excited because I wanted to have the impact on people's lives, how counselors, social workers, and other people impacted my life and during my process. And very, very quickly, the reality set in that that's just not how it works either in you know, as far as the addiction field. So early on, very early on, I've always been excited about the work. I've been fascinated with human behavior ever since I found out how deep the addiction thing goes, and then started learning deeper about trauma and mental health and things like that. It's always been fascinating to me. So when I got, you know, to this day, it still remains fascinating. But when I got into the addiction field and early on learned about the business of treatment as far as mental health or whatever, huge turnoff as far as the business aspect. And so it's not, you know, it's pretty common for people to start out in counseling positions, case manager positions, social work positions, to want to move up the ladder to, you know, senior counselor, senior case manager, clinical supervisor, director, and so on. And after a while, I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to move up this ladder. I don't want to move up in this business. Right. And the reason why I didn't want to do that is because it became clear to me that accepting positions and moving up the manager chain, the administrative chain, that there was going to be a compromise of some of my personal values. There's going to be a compromise of some of my ethics. So I was like, I'm going to stay down here on the ground with my fellow workers and do the most I can, you know. But, you know, I worked for some shady businesses, some shady agencies. It's funny. I don't know if I told you this. When I got you the book on the Young Lords,
yes,
they talk about the founder of one of the agencies that I worked for in the Bronx.
Yes.
And I'm not gonna name that agency because that agency has since went under. Huge agency in the Bronx, but they referred to the founder of that agency, who has since passed away a long time ago, as a poverty pimp. And I thought that was important and I think I texted you because I was reading the book at the same time, and I was like, I know who they're talking about. I used to work for this place. And so they referred to him as a poverty pimp. And that just seems to be a way of not describing the entire field, but a lot of people, you know, because it's heavily political, as far as local politics is concerned. You know, I mean, it goes all the way up the chain as far as politics is concerned. So when we get to the federal level, we're talking about funding and grants and all that stuff or whatever. But on the local level, it's a hustle. It's a hustle. So, you know, long story short, I became completely turned off. At one point, I left the field altogether, went and got some little IT certifications. So I was going to be like a 40-year-old new IT guy doing internships and whatever. And it was like, and as much as I love tech stuff or whatever, I didn't want to go that route. So I wound up coming back to the field and kind of reinventing myself. I got an opportunity to be a consultant rather than doing direct care and getting buried with paperwork, because it's all about paperwork. Right. You know, wherever you're working, you know, I don't care how awesome you are with your words, and if you move mountains and save lives or whatever, if your paperwork ain't right, they don't care.
Right.
They really don't care. So I'm at this, you know, I'm a consultant now. I make fairly decent money, but in this world that we live in this economy and the cost of living and all that, you know, most of us have to get second jobs or whatever. So I did that. I did that. I got a second job working as in a residential program. I did it before, working overnights, because what I found out is that it's a low paying job, but as a second income, it's really great.
Right.
You know, so I'm not relying on that one job, that one low wage position to carry me, but as a second income, it's great. And it's being that it's a supportive role and non-critical role, and I'm working overnights. It's not really difficult. You know, as far as working overnights is something that I found out that I could do fairly well. Everybody's not built for the overnight shift. Right. But so I found, you know, I did that in the past. So recently I did that again, and I went to an inpatient facility, and started working overnights, 3 12-hour shifts overnight. And my intention wasn't to work full time. I just wanted to get a little part-time gig or something on top of my full-time job. But being that they were offering 3 full-time shifts, I was like, I can do that. I can knock 3 shifts out, and that'll be my full-time work, then I'll be off for 3 days, 4 days or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I did that for a while, and I get into this place, and after a while, this is back in October, and after a while, so I'm feeling the place out. I don't tell anybody about my experience or whatever in the beginning, because I kind of want to see who has the experience there, how they do things there. And it became clear to me at some point, they had a lot of drama in this place. And, which is not uncommon, but when it carries over to the night shift, that is a little surprising to me, because usually, the drama's on the day shift. That's when all the managers are there, all the coworkers are there, anybody that's visiting the facility, audits and all that all takes place in the daytime. Like nighttime is like, you keep that in the daytime, leave us the fuck alone. Whatever you want us to do, put it in the email or whatever. Like they're not calling us because they're sleeping. Right. So what I began to notice was the turnaround in this place. Turnaround. And I'm not just talking about at the low wage bottom level. I'm talking about going all the way up, where I don't know these people, but I'm seeing emails. Please welcome the new director. Please welcome the new such and such in HR. Please, I had a thing with HR where I had to send some documents regarding my background check. And I went into my email to respond to the one that sent me the initial papers to be filled out. And the email bounced back, and she's no longer there. And I'm like, wow, like these people are like all gone or whatever. So, and then after a while, my department, which is the behavioral health tech department, some people resigned, and then people started getting fired every week, right? Now, from what I heard, some people played themselves, they deserve to be fired or whatever, or at least according to the story that I got. And then some people, we don't know what the story was. And from what we could tell, by working alongside these people, that they were fairly good workers, so we couldn't understand it. And this is where the red flag goes up. And you tell me if you agree with me or not on this. We have a meeting one time because my supervisor got fired out of nowhere. Like, from what I understand, one day they just walked her out the building, and it came out of nowhere. I really don't know what she did. I really don't care. It's like that's a done deal. But all this firing and resignations happened in a short period of time. They felt the need to call a meeting to talk to us about what's going on, whatever, which is natural, right? It's what you should be doing as leadership. So we get to that meeting one day, and there's a guy from HR in there, a new guy from HR, right? So he introduces himself, and he says he's here for support. And I don't know about you, but whenever somebody from HR is in one of our meetings talking about they there for support, red flags go up, right? Yes. Because, what are you really doing here? You know what I'm saying? Because you're not really one of us. Exactly. So, and it turns out so he tried to give us the pep talk or whatever, and trying to build the morale. They didn't even have morale in the first place, but try to build up some morale and make promises and all that. And then they get to an issue about drivers, right? So there was, certain people that were hired to be drivers, to be able to drive and pick up clients from the airport, drop them off, take them to the hospital in emergency situations, things like that. And what happened was that they had fired most of the drivers. So the guy from HR tells us, technically, we're all drivers. Right. This is what he tells us, because on our job description that we all sign, now the real him is coming out. Like, you're coming with the legal bullshit or whatever about what we signed in the job description. But the only thing that he failed to remember, because he didn't know, was that the people that were doing the driving, there was a pay differential for the driver, right? Which he didn't know. So what he was basically telling us was that we were all going to get that differential. Shut down the conversation, right? So, and then at that time, and then I'm gonna pass it over to you because I don't want to make this a 60-minute rant, but I got more stuff to talk about. But what was also said in that meeting was they brought up people that were working part-time and per diem positions, right? Which are really important in the type of work. Mm-hmm. And they said, we don't know where those schedules came from. We don't know where those positions came from. So we'll be meeting with each of you going forward. Second red flag goes up. And I'm like, what the fuck do they mean they don't know where that came from or whatever? You know, so I'm in my mind, I'm saying they're getting ready to either get rid of all these people or tell them that they got to be full-time employees, you know. And the truth of the matter is a lot of them are in school and got things going on. That's why they're only working part-time or per diem or whatever. And sure enough, little by little, they got rid of all of them. So we come out of that situation and I'm not really feeling good about that. But my whole attitude is, you know, I'm just going to come here, do my night shifts or whatever, and whatever drama they have in the daytime, you know, because, you know, the truth of the matter is this is my second job, right? This is my second gig. And, you know, the first job, that's the main focus, you know, that's where any stress that I decide to dedicate is going to go to the first job because, you know,
absolutely,
you know, but like what, you know, as far as what I'm telling you, the whole HR experience and, you know, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I know the full story. So, I know where this is going. I think that there's a misconception that, human resources exists to protect the employees and the staff. And the reality of the situation is that that's not the case. Right. Human resources exists to protect the company. And make sure that the company is doing what they're supposed to do to protect themselves from any issues with employee and staff. I recently also had an issue and then like I can relate to everything that you're saying in terms of, you know, not wanting to move up, you know, within the administration. I've always said that the higher up you are, and I know that a lot, you know, again, this is a misconception. People feel like, well, the higher up you are, then, you know, you have more freedom and more mobility. And actually, I've always found it to be the opposite. You know, when you are in a supervisory management, you know, director position, like you really need to watch your P's and Q's, every word you say, you know, everything that you do, you know, because it's just, you're responsible for more, you know? So I kind of like my position where I am. I've managed most of my life, you know, from the time I was 21 years old. I got my first management position up until I was about 25 years. And it's in this job now that I was like, no, I'm not managing. I want to be a regular employee. I want to be able to come in, do my work, punch out, leave, no problem. You know, because I want, even though I spend 40 hours a week at this job, the majority of my focus and energy is on my music, you know? So, even recently I had an issue, with, an associate that was just constantly having issues with this and that and asking questions and then asking the same question. And then, you know, so that she wouldn't get called out by me, because now it got to the point where I was like, we discussed this, go back to your notes. You know, I'm not going to repeat myself, you know? And, you know, so then she started asking other people. Long story short, there was an issue and now I had to like call her out on it. And we were building up to giving her a verbal warning because, you know, it was just getting ridiculous. And she ended up quitting before that happened because, I don't know, whatever. She claims that whatever. It was a big situation. And then I agreed with the other person and she's not going to take that disrespect. And I'm like, okay, you know what? It is what it is. So now HR is like, oh, you got to take some. Not that I have to, but they were like, would you like to take some? And I'm just like, you see, this is what I'm talking about. Like,
take some what?
Take, training in like supervising staff, communication skills,
leadership.
Right. Yeah. And I'm like, because the 400 plus hours of leadership and communication that I've already taken, isn't enough. But that's neither here nor there. I don't care. I'm the type of person that I'll always, go with anything that's going to expand me and grow me. And I get that not everybody's like that, So, but there's definitely, we have to protect ourselves. We can't let ourselves be used and abused. And a lot of times what they're asking of us is stated in a way that makes it seem like, we're concerned for you. The pep talk that you're referring to.
Right.
But ultimately, I see it for what it is, which is they're just trying to protect themselves.
Absolutely, yeah.
And corporate interests. And even in the industry that you're in, we see that. I sat on the board for a social service agency years ago. And one of the reasons why I left was because I did nothing more as a member of the board than like sit in monthly meetings. And then the rest of the time was just, we were constantly being encouraged to attend all these political events. And we've had this discussion before, I believe. I am not a politician. I cannot be a politician. I shoot too straight to be a politician. And I just couldn't function in that environment. And that's what was expected of me as a board member, so that we could get, whatever grants or funding or what have you. And I was like, you know what? I'm not cut out for this board stuff.
This is because it's a lot of bullshit.
It is. And I'm like, and at the same time, I get it because, as an organization, you exist for a reason. But then you also see how the awards that are given are mismanaged.
Oh, yeah.
And then on top of that, it's like, okay, so not only do you want me to go out there and get us this money, but then on top of that, you're going to mishandle these awards and then not really, like, I'm not with it, So I was like, no, I'm good.
No, I get it, and especially when you talk about political events, it's important to mention that, like, you're talking about literally political events, rubbing elbows with politicians and, or, kiss ass type environment or
flag
whatever.
raisings and galas and honoring this
photo ops
and women's history and every opportunity. And and they're all at City Hall or at, the Liberty House or what. And it's like,
yeah, it's not necessarily a political activism.
No, you see the same people too. It's the same, like 30 to 35 people at all these events. And it's just like, no.
So my experiences, a lot of them negative, with burnout, I've shared about burnout in school settings and professional settings, and when in our field, when you share that, a lot of people like to believe that has to do with the clients, right? Mm-hmm. Clients are problematic or whatever, and it's been my experience and a lot of experience of others, my colleagues, people in my network or whatever, that it's not really the clients. The clients are the clients. They're going to bring their issues to us because that's what job,
that's what you're
entails,
there for.
Right? But, and I emphasize this to people that the burnout that I experienced, the stress, and when I'm talking about burnout, I'm not just throwing that term around just to talk about stressed out. I'm talking to the point where a job that doesn't have any type of physical duties, I would be completely physically drained from the emotional stress and beat down to the point where there was a job that I had working for a hospital at one time, and just the amount of paperwork and the unrealistic expectations and all this, to the point where I couldn't get out of bed sometimes in the morning. Like, and some days I would leave that place with pain in my chest. You know what I'm saying? So when I'm saying burnout, I'm not just talking about the regular stressed out type thing. I'm talking about where it not only is taking an emotional toll, but you start feeling it physically. And I was at the point where I wanted to walk away altogether, But as a result of that experience with the hospital, and as a result with the experiences working with the agency that so-called founded by the poverty pimp, I developed a resentment with agencies, distrust with agencies. And every time I start a new job or whatever, I started from a place of distrust. Like, I don't trust agencies or whatever. And but now I'm to the point where I'm nearly 2 decades into the work, where I know how to spot the bullshit. I know the slick talk and all that. So I go there expecting the bullshit, and in the beginning it's all roses and they just lay out that red carpet for you, welcoming you, and everything is all shiny, bright, and cheery until the probation period is over, you know. And I like to say is, like, I'm not only on a probation period, but I'm at the point in the career where the company's on a probation period as far as my expectations, because I've developed myself to a position where, especially when I got a daytime job and a good full-time job that's not in jeopardy, to walk away from situations or decline. Or I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pass on this or whatever. So I have this resentment, and I didn't know anything about capitalism when this resentment was developed. I didn't know anything about workers' rights and whatever, even though I was in a union at a time. And that's an interesting story too, but I didn't really know anything about that. That's why early on I was saying a lot of my positions right now were already present. I just didn't identify it. It wasn't diagnosed at the time. Right. Whatever. But so to get back to the present situation, that nighttime job, the resignations, the firing, the drama over a 2-month period. Let's say somewhere from end of January into March, every week. So mind you, I work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, off a few days. I come back in the following week or whatever. And by the time I come back in, this person got fired. This person got let go. So every week we were averaging 1 to 2 people either being fired or resigning or whatever. And all from my department when we're already short staffed. And at the same time this is going on, there's no new hires coming in. So I know this is not good, right? And I keep, and I'm telling my coworkers, I'm like, because especially one was like an assistant manager. So he was like the in-between, and he'd kind of communicate for management or whatever. And I kind of like say shit because I know he'll go back and tell management. And I kept saying, why are they firing all these people with no fucking plan? Right. To bring in people to replace it. We're talking about an inpatient facility that operates 24 hours a day around the clock. You know what I'm saying? So that coverage is important. But nothing, right? So now, mind you, I told you my supervisor got fired. So that position was open for that period, pretty much that 2-month period that I was talking about. And they were like, they were doing in-house interviews, right? They were interviewing some of my coworkers, my colleagues for that position or whatever. Some of my colleagues was like, Scott, why don't you do it? And I was like, absolutely not. I will not. I'm not interested in that. I don't want nothing to do with that because I already know it's a mess. Right. Right. I don't want nothing to do with that. And in the meantime, they had like nursing directors overseeing the department, which is a whole nother tale of fuckery that I don't even have time to go into. But so they were handling it. They were handling the scheduling or whatever. It was a big mess. So they hired somebody, right? we're like, finally, we could start getting back on track. But I had already been voicing my concerns about the shortage of staff, where there's times I go in, now mind you, I'm pretty much new to the company. I'm barely off probation, and I find myself being the lead certain nights, and being in charge of certain nights, although my paycheck don't reflect that and my title don't reflect that. So I kind of wanted to make it clear, like, don't make this a habit.
Right.
I don't mind rising to the occasion, because this is what happens. But if this is good, this type of shortage of staff that can be, you can tell what's going to happen when you fire people like that. Like, then we'll just be leaderless at night, because I'm not going to do it. So they bring on a guy, take the position. The night shift, we don't see him because we don't see management. We don't see daytime staff or whatever. But we get the email introducing him or whatever. And for a couple of weeks, it's quiet. We really don't hear anything. We don't hear any change. They continue to fire people in the meantime. And it got to the point where, and I'm not hardly exaggerating, where they fired about 2/3 of the department my department where I work, right? So on a night shift for 2 units where we normally have maybe 6 to 8 people for the units, we find ourselves with 3 people, which involved 1 lead and 2 techs, 1 tech on one floor, 1 tech on another floor, and the lead kind of bouncing back from both floors or whatever, which is not good. We're supposed to have more people for the amount of patients that we have on each floor or whatever. So
Can I just interject really quick?
Go ahead.
So you said you've done this before. So are you comparing, everything that you just described about how many leads, how many techs, the number of patients, is this in comparison to the previous job you had, which was a similar environment, like the night job?
It was similar. It's interesting though, with that job, that one particular job was a lot more patient. It was residents and because I was just in the hospital setting, but the other job was a residential setting. They were there for more long term. So it was different in the way where it was only one person on the unit, and then one person on each unit, which was 1, 2, 3, 4 units, and then one manager floating around. But the difference with that is our shift involved, by the time I got there, it was 11 o'clock. So they're all sleeping. Right. The job that I'm talking about now started at 7 o'clock.
Got it.
So between 7 and 10:30, 11-ish, we're dealing with clients.
Right.
And, making sure that the schedule's being followed, routine, taking them out for smoke breaks, doing counts, all that. And another thing was, this job that I'm talking about now was an inpatient detox, where people are going through withdrawals from, it involves people being physically sick, medicated, on medication, anything could happen, so it was different than the residential setting.
So it requires more staffing.
Yes,
got it. Okay.
Yes. Especially, trying to monitor and doing room checks and making sure everybody's all right, things like that.
Makes sense.
It required more. So the new manager comes on and sends out an email introducing himself. And with that email, he attaches a form. And that form was called the availability form. So when I get it, I download it, I look at it, and it turns out that this form, and it's a pre-hire form. Like, it's something they give you, supposed to give you in the beginning to know your availability. And it's designed for, it seems like, because obviously when people call out, when people take PTO or whatever, there's going to be a shortage of staff. So they were offering overtime where they'll tell people, listen, we got an open shift 7 a.m. or 7 p.m., and look for people to volunteer or whatever. So that form pretty much looked like they were able to see what days people are available, so they can, instead of just putting out an email to everybody waiting to see who will respond,
they
can just contact certain people saying, hey, you said you would be available on weekends or whatever, so we, so here I am getting this where I'm already months into the job or whatever, another red flag. So I'm like, okay, so what I put in that form was my schedule, and I typed into the form to let them know that I'm only available to the schedule that I was hired to do.
Right.
It's possible that I may be able to fill in for some shifts or whatever as needed, but it depends on what's going on at the time or whatever. Mm-hmm. So next thing you know, with that email, he sets up a meeting with the department, and the meeting starts at 6 p.m. I start work at 7 p.m. My night, the night crew starts work at 7 p.m., which is not unheard of, because what happened in the past was they would send out a Zoom link. So whoever's not present, just, or a phone number to call in or whatever. So I responded asking, hey, do we have a Zoom link for this meeting? And he said, the new manager said, unfortunately, no, it's just in person. Okay. I'm just not going to be there. I didn't say that, but, my response was, that's unfortunate, and just, I left it at that. So I get to the job about 6:45 that day. I didn't attempt to go in the meeting because the meeting started at 6. I'm not going to walk in at 6:45 or whatever. So I just went right to my unit or whatever. And so that meeting was over about 7:15ish, right? And so I'm talking to my workers, my colleagues, about what happened. I want to know what happened in the meeting. And I'm expecting to meet the new manager. Mm-hmm. And what happened was, after that meeting, he got the hell out of there. I guess he had been there too long that day. Mm-hmm. Or whatever. So he left. So he didn't come to introduce the handful of people that were working overnight that weren't able to make that meeting, that he didn't consider might not be able to make that meeting. So I'm talking to some of my coworkers, and they said that he just pretty much was talking about his experience, and he kind of identified, he didn't kind of, this is what they told me. According to them, they said that he's known as a fixer, that he's brought into companies to be the fixer. Mm-hmm. I thought that was interesting. I've never really heard anyone, at least not in my line of work, like identify themselves as a fixer. Like when I hear fixer, I think of like a Donald Trump attorney or something, like a fixer type thing, which is, but I was like, oh, okay. And then in my mind, I'm like, he's probably some type of clown, right? And then they proceed to tell me that he has a point system. And I'm like, what do you mean a point system? And apparently, as far as disciplinary action, corrective action or whatever, he gives out points or whatever. I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds third grade-ish. You know what I'm saying? So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like on paper, because if you have a point system that involves disciplinary action, corrective action, whatever, that needs to be on paper. Never got it. So anyway, moving along. He said those that were in that meeting, or those that weren't in that meeting, or didn't show up to, listen to the language, didn't show up for the meeting. Unfortunately, they're not going to get consideration when it comes to scheduling. Another red flag, right? So here's where we're going with this. They got rid of the per diem. They got rid of the part-time, which filled in gaps here and there, right? Which was really useful. Got rid of all of them. Got rid of the full-time staff. 2/3 of the staff are gone, right? So now he's tasked with trying to fill in open slots that they fired people. Like the people that had them, they fired. They're short staffed. So I get an email one Friday evening, and usually I'm not paying attention to emails because like I'm not coming back till Monday. But I get a text from my coworker. Look at that email. It has a schedule attached to it. So that week, instead of working 3 12-hour shifts, he decided I was going to work 4 12-hour shifts back to back. And he in the email, in the subject line, he refers to it as a slight change of schedule or whatever. So I emailed back and I was like, unfortunately, I'm unable to work that schedule. I don't, I've never agreed to it or whatever. And then he kind of hit me back with his jive ass bullshit, talking about teamwork and this and that, and this is what has to happen or whatever. And I was like, and then I hit him with, I pretty much said, had I known that I'd be required to work more than 40 hours in 1 week back to back to back, I would have identified that as a safety concern for myself and the clients. And then he responded, oh, no, that was a typo. Because I know the word safety concerns, clients sends off red flags for them.
Right.
For HR and all that. So he made a typo, he said, even though he did that with a couple other people and there weren't typos on them. Like he made them work those schedules. So I'm getting to the point where I got some PTO. I'm getting the feeling like this job ain't working out. I'm thinking to myself, I'm really going to take this PTO. I don't want to get jerked out of this PTO. I said, it's looking like I'm probably going to have to walk away from this job because I don't like the way it's going. I don't like where this dude is coming from or whatever. And so I put in the PTO, and right before I go on vacation, I literally, one of the women at night, I give her a hug and I'm like, listen, there's a good chance you're not going to see me again. Like after vacation, I already know like it's either like, either they're going to fire me because I'm going to keep pushing back, because I'm not going to deal with that bullshit. And they already think, my colleagues think I'm crazy for the way that I'm pushing back in the email, right. With everybody attached. So sure enough, I go on vacation and I'm not checking my email during vacation because I don't do that shit. And I get back from vacation on a Friday. That Sunday, I'm preparing to go to work that Monday. So I said, let me check at least on Sunday so I don't walk into no shit on Monday. So we got another email that Sunday with the schedule for the week going forward. My schedule, which was normally Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, is now Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And so I hit him back and I'm like, there must be some mistake with the schedule again. I was trying to tell him like maybe another typo or whatever, but that's not my schedule, and he's like, unfortunately, we're short staffed and there has to be some moving around. And this is pretty much the way it was going to have to be done or whatever. And then he hit me with some shit that unfortunately the team comes first. And that sounds real good, but fuck you with your team comes first. Cause now his inexperience is coming in because you could tell that he just came in and he thought he was going to start shuffling some shit around and everybody's just going to fall in line, which for the most part was happening at the time. So I went back and forth with him and, and I hit him with, and his response to me was, it seems like you had an agreement with my predecessor or whatever. So the wording was that I had some type of special agreement or special accommodations were made with the previous supervisor where I got a certain schedule or whatever. And I hit him back in the email and I was like, I was hired to work the schedule that was offered. I was like, it was either weekends or Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I chose what the company was offering at the time. This is it, right? And so then he hits me back and pretty much just gives me different wording about what needs to be done or whatever, and I was like, so it sounds like to me that the agency is no longer to hold up their end of the agreement. And then he kind of went around that because now I'm putting the focus on the agency. It's not someone, you're not going to say that has special agreement with somebody you fired. Yeah. So that's no longer valid. Right. So this is what the agency offered. This is the agreement that I made with the agency. The schedule is what they had on the fucking Indeed job ad. You know what I'm saying? That's what made it attractive to me. So he said, yeah, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that. And I said, well, then just say that the agency can't keep up their end of the agreement anymore. Whatever. And I left it like that. And then I was like, who's your supervisor? Right. So I decided, let me go up the chain. His supervisor's a nurse in nursing department, whatever. And so she comes in and pretty much repeats the same thing. We understand that you had an agreement with this and that and whatever. And I kind of just reiterated everything I said. And then she kind of like pushed it back on him, have a meeting with him. And I said, okay, your supervisor obviously doesn't want to be bothered with this or whatever. And then I moved it up to her supervisor or whatever. And I kind of just left it at that. So this is Monday, Tuesday, I'm supposed to be working. That was my regular schedule. So at the time I made the decision, and I'm going to start wrapping this up, but I made the decision that I was going to leave the job, right? But the last paycheck was being through payroll was going through that week, and I was going to get paid that Thursday, and I wanted to make sure there was no bullshit with my paycheck. Like, right. I don't want to hear like you're holding a portion because I have your key cards and this bullshit. Like if I'm going to come into the facility and rob it, whatever. Like, and I don't want to hear that you're going to mail me my fucking last check either. Like, I want my shit. So what happened was Wednesday afternoon, about 4:00, he calls me. And I don't think I really told you about the conversation that me and him had. So he called me off guard because I had the number saved under my old supervisor's name. And I was thinking it was her calling me, but it was actually the office phone, right. Her old office, which is his office now. So he introduced me, tell me, who he is. And this was my response to him. What's up? Like, what do you want? So he called me to find out, and I quote, if I was still interested, that it seems like we all got off on a bad start and all this and that, and wanted to know if I come in to have a meeting with him and his supervisor. And I said, a meeting for what? Like, for what? What is there to talk about at this point? And I was like, because right now, like, are we going to talk about my loss of wages? Because I'm supposed to be working. Like, these days I was supposed to be working and now I can't work. Right. So are we going to talk about that? And then it turned out that in that one of the emails that I sent, I characterized him as being disingenuous. And apparently that kind of hit him in the gut. Right. Because he brought that up in the phone call. He was like, you said that I'm disingenuous and this. And I was like, you are. And he was like, but you don't know my character. And I was like, I know the character that you're presenting. So if that's your character, or that's the character of the agency being translated through you or whatever, that's part of your character now. This is the way you're acting. You know what I'm saying? And I guess he felt that he was a good guy, or that, that he was, it was about his workers or whatever. And, I kind of had to, then he tried to throw his experience on me. I've been doing this for 12 years, 13 years, and I got some clinical experience. And I was like, well, I don't know if you checked the resume, but I've been doing this for almost 20 years and it's all clinical. Like, I don't have some clinical experience. It's all clinical, and I was like, that's probably what you should have did when you first came on. Pull our resumes to see where your strength is, you know what I'm saying, and who's going to help you work through this, who you can rely on. But apparently you didn't do that. You know what I'm saying? So, bottom line with the phone call was, he kind of presented it to me like I was the only one, right, that was pushing back, that I was the only one starting shit. I'm communicating with my coworkers, right? And I told him, I was like, or maybe it's just I'm the only one that has another job that I'm able to fall back on and walk away from this shit, right? And I was like, I told him, I have, some of my colleagues, mostly all my colleagues have 2 jobs and they need both jobs. So they're not in a position to walk away. Right. Just like that. Right. And that, and that's how you're exploiting them. You think that they're putting the team first and they're in a position where they can't just walk away. You know what I'm saying? Or some of them may have, which at least a couple of them do, have their health care tied to this job. Yes. So they just can't walk away. And I was like, you didn't think that far though, right? You just thinking that people are just putting the team first and falling in line. And the reality is that people just can't fucking walk away like that. And ultimately I told them I'm not some teenager working a summer job and reaching out and waiting to hear what my schedule is going to look like every week. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm at a point in my career and at my fucking age where work-life balance is important. Yes. The primary job, the one job that pays double of what I'm getting paid in that job is important. You know what I'm saying? So, this whole mixing up the schedules and, you could just be throwing people around, like, I don't like the next thing I know, you're going to tell me that I'm going to be working daytime. From one week to the next. And I told him, and I was like, if you've been working in this field for a while, I was like, my experience, like your experience should tell you that if you think that this is a temporary situation where we got staff turnover and we got staff shortage, like this is common, you know what I'm saying? Especially with low wage positions. People are always leaving. People are always getting fired because a lot of people don't give a fuck because you're not paying them and you're not giving a fuck about them.
Right.
Right. So that's the type of, that the morale is always shot. There's never any morale. So I was like, you basically telling me that every 3 months or so, or every 6 months or so, that you just going to go changing my schedule any way you see, please, to put the team first. And I was like, absolutely not, sir. And he got to the point where he was like, well, I guess, you made up your mind or whatever. And I was like, absolutely. I'm not going to go through that. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, you know what? Good luck to you. And I said, because you're going to need it. Because I give you 6 months. Because, the way you coming in there thinking you're going to handle that situation or whatever. And that was that. Got the full check in the direct deposit the next day. As soon as I saw that, sent out a beautiful resignation letter. It was very different from what I'm used to because resignation letters are such bullshit. Let me just say this, right? Resignation letters are supposed to always be positive, right? To a point where it's like, I really enjoyed my experience, this and that, or at the very least, I really enjoyed working alongside my colleagues or whatever. And you kind of leave out the part about the management and your bad experiences or whatever, just to try to leave in good graces so they don't talk bad about you when you need a reference or when people are doing background checks in terms of previous employment, So I found a way to word this and I took your advice because you checked me on my pettiness in my writing because, my petty level is at a superb premium level in my writing. So I took out the petty and got straight to the point and I found out that what they were doing was pretty much called, unpredictable scheduling practices, which has an impact on the worker. And that's how I worded it. I was like, unfortunately, due to the unpredictable scheduling practices, I'm forced to, submit my resignation or whatever. And, I would love to have stayed on for a couple more weeks while people are onboarded and you're able to start filling these positions. However, you've unexpectedly changed my hours, which makes it impossible for me to return. Right. Therefore, my last date was before I went on vacation.
Right.
Peace. I didn't say peace, but, and I left it at that and just walked away, So I'm saying that to say where, now where I've gotten more involved, I've gotten a good look and studied how capitalism looks and how worker exploitation looks, because that's what this is, right? This is work, because they don't do that at the HR level and people, they don't, now those people may work long hours and work weekends or whatever because their job is requiring them to have less personal life and, dive in and absorb the work environment and the work or whatever. But as far as someone sitting there saying, yeah, we'll let you know Sunday what the next week's schedule is going to look like. They don't experience that. That happens with low wage people.
Right.
That was my experience with it. I was joking with you before. I was like, luckily they didn't keep me on because that's a place that needs to be unionized. And that's a healthcare facility. It's a hospital-based place. With nurses on staff or whatever. Right. So there's certain unions that, work for healthcare workers or whatever, and I was like, if they kept me on, I might have started some shit like Starbucks, like they doing in Starbucks right now, but and maybe they knew that. So, they were like, if there was any room to compromise with me, they weren't going to do that with me because they already saw how I was pushing back and I didn't care who the manager was or who from HR was or anything like that. Right. So thoughts, everything. You knew most of this, but I didn't really get into the full details.
I will say this much. In terms of worker exploitation, it's nothing new. As you pointed out, they usually do this with low income with low wage workers and with the younger population with teenage kids, the high school kids who have more flexibility with their schedule. It's common practice in capitalism, and perhaps you never experienced it in the healthcare environment because more so now than ever, healthcare is a business. I see it every day because I'm on the revenue side of healthcare. And it's disheartening, especially as someone who tends to kind of go towards more holistic measures, medicine, healing modalities. The reason why I do that and that every day I'm urged to do that is because I see how the healthcare in this country is it's a business, and it's all about maximizing profit and not so much about what's best for the patient. You described how in your previous job, most of them were residential, and them giving your hours, they were sleeping. But like this go round, it's, you're actually during their waking hours, and there's significant more activity. So that in and of itself would require more staffing, and for them to be firing during a time where people are resigning, and it's madness. It sounds to me like a typical capitalist environment, that for-profit environment, and it's starting to creep into, and I don't think it's starting to creep into, I just think that the more we bring it to the surface, the more evident it becomes that this is how it's always been. I was trying to have a conversation with someone this week about, the difference, because they didn't know the difference between universal healthcare like Canada and healthcare here. And, their argument was, well, government moves slow and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, but at the end of the day, everybody's getting the same level of care no matter what. It's not based on whether you're rich or poor, because that's what our healthcare is based on. If you have Medicaid, you're getting shit care. You know what I'm saying? But if you've got a job and you've got a good paying job where you can go with your company's high plan, even if you have a job, but let's say you have,
a higher tier.
You're a single mom. You're a single mom. It's a deadbeat dad situation, or vice versa. You're a single dad, deadbeat mom situation, no child support. It's just your little low income, right? And you have to cover your child. You know what I'm saying? Or even if you are, both parents in a home, one doesn't have health care. If you need to add a spouse to your plan, forget about it. You're paying through, it's not uncommon for, a couple, everybody's on their own health plan, because if I need to add a spouse, forget about it. I'm going to be paying $500 a month for healthcare. So, I'm in this country, the level of healthcare that you get, the quality of healthcare that you get is almost solely dependent on how much money you make. Let's cut the bullshit. And so this example is on the flip side, right? So you're talking about about the addiction field. Who are the people that can afford these facilities? Who are the people that can afford these facilities, right? Okay, that's why they're there. And then on top of the fact that they can afford it, look at the level of care that they're getting. They're not even getting top level. Okay, because they're short staffed and this and that. So even the ones who are paying premium dollars to get into these facilities, they're not getting the level of care that they should be getting. It's all a game. It's all capitalism. It's all about putting more money in the pockets of people who already have enough. And the ones who don't have, oh well, Yeah, that's that.
Two things you just touched on that I want to highlight. Childcare. You talked about childcare. It's not uncommon for people at different income levels, but especially low wage positions where people may have family members looking after the children, while you work nights, like a mom might work nights, or you might have two parents, one works daytime, one works nighttime, and you kind of working around your schedules as far as who's going to do what with the children or whatever, who's going to get them ready for school, who's going to do the dinner when they come home, who's going to do the homework with them, whatever. So we have routines that works around our schedules, and our commitments to our work. And when you change people's schedules unexpectedly, unpredictably, whatever, you throw off all those dynamics. You know what I'm saying? So that's a form of exploitation.
Oh, I get it. I used to do schedules when I worked in a retail environment, and I had a couple of girls, they had children, and it was like, and of course we would switch up the schedule based on season. This was the busy season, and I would try to give them a consistent schedule as much as possible. But sometimes they wanted more hours, or someone was on vacation, or someone wasn't going to be available this day. So there was always, a thing about, oh, well, maybe we can get so-and-so to cover you. Well, let's talk to her. Hey, can you cover Yeah, maybe I could leave my kid with my sister, or let me talk to my mom, or let me, because this is what they had to deal with, right. So yeah, it's like a everyday thing. And for you to think that you can just, what you experienced was a way for him to really weed out the people that weren't going to function within this environment that was ultimately just going to be the optimal functionality for the profitability of the agency. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's why they did all that. They were just weeding them all out.
Which was a for-profit agency, by the way.
Huh?
It was a for-profit agency, right? Because it's in my field, it's largely non-profit, but there are for-profits.
Yes.
And you can tell, especially with this particular agency, who's about the money.
Exactly.
And for people that are listening that might be, and this is not to discourage people that are looking to get into helping professionals, whether it be social work, counseling,
right.
even healthcare, nursing, things like that. Because we all experience, a lot of times we all work in the same environment, in different departments and things like that. So it's not to discourage, but it's kind of to help increase the level of awareness. And especially when we're talking about capitalism, and some people just can't grasp, but we're talking about helping people and businesses that are designed to help people. Like, what does capitalism have to do with it? It has everything to do with it. Because, when we're talking about for-profit and non-profit, it's always about the money. In for-profit, it's about the direct profit. How much profit can we make or whatever? And whoever's going to be exploited in order to make the profit, so be it. In nonprofit, it's about the funding.
Right.
Right. So the hustle and the cutthroat environment and the exploitation is all about just to keep the funding sources happy. Right.
Right.
When it comes time to apply for grants and stuff like that, and where the agency is presenting what they offer and what they could do for these grants. It's like, oh yeah, we could do this, we could do that. Sure. Work around the clock. Sure. We could do that. And what they're saying is that the bottom level, the low wage workers, that they're going to be the ones to do all that in order to get the grant. You know what I'm saying? So even though even though it's nonprofit, it's still about the money. It's just, because there's a term that I learned not too long ago, and I couldn't imagine it either. The non-profit industrial complex.
Right.
Is, you know what I'm saying? Second thing that you touched on, you talked about the level of care, the quality of client care. And this is another thing that I had to bounce on the new manager, because his thing was, and he came in the door saying that I'm all about the client. Right? I'm for the client first, which sounds real good, right? What, from someone on the outside, that sounds real good. You should be, right? And that's exactly my point, that any of us that's been doing this for a while, we don't need to say that shit.
Right.
Right? Because we're already working in a field that doesn't really pay a lot of money as it is in basic levels of service. It doesn't pay a lot of money as it is. So, we're not really doing it just to be exploited. You know what I'm saying? We're doing it because there's people that need help. So people that are for the client or about the client don't need to say that shit. And the people that come in the door that are always saying that shit, another red flag goes up for me. You know what I'm saying? And I had to tell him, I told him, I said, when you are changing people's schedule around, unpredictably, out of nowhere, you're disrupting the work-life balance. You got younger kids that were in here part-time and per diem positions that were in college, right? Those are your future workers coming in, looking to get into the field. And you're going to just change their schedule around when they got classes on certain nights and things like that. Did you think about that? That's just when you're disrupting all these things that are going on with people's lives outside of this job.
Right.
I said, what's happening is you're causing a turnaround. You're causing a shortage of staff, which ultimately trickles down to the level of care that the clients are getting, the same clients that you just said that you're all about.
Bingo.
You know what I'm saying? And I got to find a good sound effect for that part to really, because that's exactly what I told them on the phone.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. That's exactly what I told him on the phone, and he was quiet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because he didn't think that far. But I've been around long enough to know, regardless of where you are on that chain in the administrative class or the owner class or whatever, and you still convincing yourself that you about the client, you know what I'm saying? Think about how you're treating your workers, because if you ain't treating your workers right, the ones that are on the bottom doing the direct care that are face to face with these clients, if you ain't treating them right, then you're not treating your clients right.
Absolutely. Exploiting your workers is not the key to success.
To any business.
Any business. Absolutely not. It's, yeah. I mean, I've had my fair share of experience. I even make sure I take care of my team. I don't let people just talk to my team any old way because of that. Because I don't want someone on my team saying, at the same time, if you do something wrong, I'm gonna let you know and I'm gonna correct you. But because I want you to take that as a learning experience and move forward with it, whether you move forward at the company or not.
Right.
But
that's leadership. Those are leadership skills right there.
Well,
what you just said, that's a demonstration of leadership skills. Right.
But worker exploitation is not the way to go.
So I'm gonna read a little piece from, this is a research article from the Harvard Kennedy School Malcolm Weiner Center for Social Policy. And the article, the title of the article is "It's About Time: How Work Schedule Instability Matters for Workers and Families." And some of the key points of this article, one, it says, having an unstable and unpredictable work schedule leads to turnover. Because of precarious schedules make it untenable for workers to meet their personal needs and care for their families. That seems to be common sense to me.
Pretty much.
You know what I'm saying? Unstable schedules experience higher rates of turnover, and such job loss has well-documented negative effects on household finances, psychological well-being, and health.
Hello.
Okay? Lastly, unstable schedules are an unrecognized contributor to racial inequality in the United States, because what they're talking about in this article, the service industry, the food service industry,
some other industries,
but certain industries that are largely where the lower wage positions are held by Black and brown employees. You know what I'm saying? So the people that may be struggling with healthcare arrangements, I mean childcare arrangements with healthcare, they got their healthcare depending on this job or whatever.
Right.
These are the people that are being exploited the most, which I'm sure this dude he didn't really think it that far. And to tell you the truth, when I was exchanging with him, I didn't think it that far as far as the impact it has as far as race is concerned, but as far as the workers, because then when I talked about my colleagues or whatever, and my particular department was particularly Black and brown people. work in those positions.
There you go.
And every other position was a mixture, but a lot of them were predominantly white people working in the positions or whatever. So that's just to give an example. So those of us that are working in an addiction field and social service settings, social work positions or whatever, like we're not exempt from the capitalist bullshit. You know, we probably...
It's a shame because it impacts the social service. It impacts the community. It impacts society, you know, and something else that we have to fight against. Yeah,
because I mentioned to you, I have this joke now, and sometimes I say it, you know, like, you know, we'd be texting throughout the week or whatever, and you'd be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm sitting here trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, right? And that may sound like really pathetic at times, but what that really means is that I'm reevaluating my current position.
Absolutely.
And what's next?
Yep.
Like, am I just going to sit here and take this type of bullshit, or am I going to elevate myself, whether it be through education or new job opportunities or whatever, or a combination of those,
right.
To be in a better position to push back and maybe even have an impact and influence on policies, you know, not just policies for the patient, but for the worker that's responsible for the patient. That's one thing that there's all this talk, and especially the last several years with the opioid epidemic, where funding, you know, we need the funding for the treatment to improve the level of care, whatever. And in some cases, especially under the Obama administration, that funding was starting to come out, right? People were getting funding, certain states, New York got it, New Jersey got it, or whatever, or a good chunk of funding or whatever. And it may have went into treatment availability, maybe some new programs or whatever. But what it didn't go into is the worker, you know, the worker's salaries, you know, the worker's benefits. You know, there's no offerings for tuition reimbursement because, you know, these are positions that a lot of places are requiring master level, you know, a master's or whatever to come out and make some bullshit anyway. You know what I'm saying? But that would require that you invest in your workforce.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you can improve the quality of treatment and take that funding and put it to better use. Not that I'm not saying it's not for good use. That's for the funding that they do use. And that's for not really talking about the funding that went other places that we can't really, you know, we can't really follow.
That's another episode.
That's another episode. But, final thoughts. Give it to me.
It's funny, just now I thought I have another friend who works in a social service agency, and not too long ago she had to take a leave, her second in her career of being, you know, with a social service agency because of burnout. And it just, you know, and then you sharing your experience just made me think, like, what is the social service agency? What is, you know, what are these community agencies doing for their workers? Because it's not easy to be, I mean, I have an aunt who was a social worker in, you know, Jersey City for many years when I was younger. And I remember seeing her stop at the house, you know, 8:30 at night, talking about she just got back from, you know, being out all day visiting and this and that. And I, you know, this is my mom's younger sister. She'd break down crying from the stress and this and that. And, you know, it's like, what are these agencies doing to, you know, help the workers and not screw you guys over with things like schedule changes and just all that BS, you know? You absorb so much of, you know, when you're, you know, interacting with clients and you see things that can, you know, weigh heavy on the spirit. With trauma. Absolutely.
Face to face with trauma.
Yes. And so it's a very real thing. And I think there's a lot of different industries where that's, you know, and I think that HR, you know, some HR companies are like, you know, building that up, but I think that more can be done to really make sure that your employees are okay, you know. But yeah, that's my final thought.
On a positive note, my final thought, and you just triggered it, as far as some changes that are made or some ideas or some plans to go in a better direction. What I can say over the last few years, the last handful of years is, and this was actually supposed to be happening all along, but the importance of self-care.
Yes. And
supervision, or especially during this whole COVID working remotely situation where, a lot of, I know my team, my agency, the company that I work for during the daytime, the primary job, checking in, having weekly meetings, bi-weekly meetings, part of self-care. What do you do for self-care? Right. Sharing your tips with your colleagues, so you get better ideas. I work in an agency that has a lot of social workers and therapists or whatever. So we're doing different types of exercises, breathing exercises, things like that, which is really, really important in any type of work environment.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Not just to leave it up to the employee to do it on their own, but to kind of check in to see what they're doing, make sure they're doing, you know what I'm saying? That's really, really important. And a lot of people probably don't recognize the importance and the benefit of like a actual self-care program, like what you do or whatever, as far as dealing with the work level, but doing it as far with your colleagues is really important also.
Yeah.
To better connect with your team or whatever, which ultimately you build a stronger team.
Yeah.
The morale, regardless of the circumstances you're in, it helps build the morale, and you're able to present yourself and present the services in a more productive and a strong, productive way when it comes to the people that you're serving.
Absolutely.
Ooh, another good one.
I know, right?
Another good one. Where do we go from here? I would like to, as kind of a spin-off from this topic or a continuation of this topic, going forward, I want to talk about hustle culture.
Okay.
I know you're familiar. As far as that term, hustle culture, is a thing, and like people might not be familiar. And I think it'd be important. It'd be great for us to really paint a picture of what that really looks like and how that really applies to what we talked about just now, this capitalist system as a whole. So, what do you think? I
think that's good. Yeah, I can already think of one Instagram page that I follow that addresses that specifically. Then and their whole thing is that the hustle culture is just the foundation of capitalism.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
The foundation of a lot of other ills of society, and their whole thing is we're gonna rest.
Yeah.
So I'm with it next time.
Yeah. And also we got to talk about the Great Resignation.
I think you kind of touched on it when you're talking about all these people resigning and stuff, and I've seen it too.
But we need to talk about that as far as this as being a moment in history. Like, this is a thing.
Yes.
And why it's a thing, and why this situation that I just went through with that employer is completely fucking foolish, considering the moment we're in as far as the Great Resignation.
Exactly.
So we need to talk about that some more.
Next
time.
All right.
It was great again. And like always, we will put the Linktree in the podcast description along with the link for the article. And
please share, like, comment, message us with any ideas. Yes, subscribe, but mostly listen.
Just listen. It's been great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Peace.
Your home on the range. Money puts the broker in the stock exchange. You make money on your 9 to 5 to earn your living so you survive. It takes money to pay your rent and to eat. Without money, you're hungry on the street. It takes money. Cash money, to the bill. So you steal some money, you go to jail, and then you turn around, need some for bail. But then you need a dime to call your lawyer, to plead innocent and say they never saw you. But before you, a lawyer, I'll get you free. He asks how will you pay his fee? Oh, but you have no money, you're in a jam. Your lawyer says to throw the man in the slam. It takes money. Cash cash money, money, to the bill. It takes money, money, that's right, cash money, money, to the bill, to the B-I-double-L bill. Hill,